Hey, this is Phil with Skeletons and Coffers. I decided that I would use my real name, which is Phil, instead of the moniker Skigley going forward. And today we are talking about philosophy, the philosophy of mathematics, a couple topics that I've been wanting to discuss for a while. There are two areas that I would like to discuss, or two topics that I would like to bring up. But before that, I would like to say a little bit about me. I know you don't know me and have no reason to believe anything I'm saying, but I do actually have a doctorate in mathematical logic. Maybe if the channel grows, I can become more open about that and maybe do a face disclosure and talk about that. But I ended up not pursuing a career in academia, and I pivoted to a career in corporate world. But I still have a strong interest in philosophy and mathematics, so I wanted to present my ideas here for people to hear and discuss and consider. And the first topic I got to introduce is mathematical Platonism. What is that? This is a position in the philosophy of mathematics that says the relations of concepts to other concepts, that these relations have some sort of special property that makes them real, but not real in a physical sense. So the mathematical realm has ontological legitimacy aside from any physical instantiation of the mathematical concepts. When I say something like the sum of all the angles in a triangle equals 180, assuming Euclidean geometry, this is a truth aside from any physical triangle that has been drawn on a flat surface, and that this truth is somehow non-physical, is intrinsic, is a conceptual truth, and has real ontological legitimacy, and is worthy of our discussion and further investigation. I think one of the best arguments for mathematical Platonism, just to kind of introduce the topics that I want to eventually discuss. These aren't the two claims that I want to eventually discuss slash make, but before that, I need to give a little bit of background. The best arguments for mathematical Platonism, in my opinion, come from computability theory, or come from the fact that any programming language you can come up with, if you give it unbounded time, unbounded memory, the class of problems which any particular programming language can solve ends up being the same class. And this class is called computably enumerable sigma 01, and it is a mathematical construct that you can derive and deal with in a purely conceptual sense, although it has a real physical bumping into our reality, where actual computers that are implemented in the physical world do have the upper bound of the problems that they can solve being sigma 01. So the fact that this conceptual construct, which exists in a totally abstract sense, has such profound implications for the physical world, tells me that these mathematical ideas are in fact legitimate aside from the physical instantiations, that they have real ontological legitimacy and should be investigated. And so now, having established mathematical Platonism, I would like to reflect a little bit on the subject, the topic. The first consideration that I would like to make is thinking about how the structure and relation of Platonism itself relates to the Platonic world. So to me, Platonism is a concept. So in the conceptual realm, you have this sort of concept that legitimizes all the other legitimate concepts. And this is what Platonism sort of is. And so I phrase it as Platonism is a legitimate idea asserting the legitimacy of legitimate ideas. And there is a sort of self-referential impredicativity there, because one of the legitimate ideas that Platonism is asserting the legitimacy of is Platonism itself. I actually view this self-referential loop as actually being there in reality. I guess the first move is you assume ideas have legitimate ontology. That's the first move, the acceptance of Platonism, mathematical Platonism. The second move is to say the concept of ideas having legitimate ontology has an interesting role in our ontology of ideas. It is a legitimate idea asserting the legitimacy of legitimate ideas, and this is a sort of impredicative situation where the truth of, or one of the ideas that is being called legitimate by the legitimate idea of Platonism is Platonism itself, if that makes sense. Yeah, so that's the first consideration I would like to make, is just reminisce on the place Platonism itself holds in the conceptual realm. Now, moving on to the second topic that I would like to discuss. So we have our physical realm, and there are entities in the physical realm. You have people, you have chairs, you have cars, and if we accept Platonism, then we have a non-physical realm. There is a realm of abstract truth, the Platonic realm, if you want to call it that, and you have this thing. And my question is, are there objects or entities that exist in this Platonic realm? Firstly, I think concepts relate to other concepts regardless of time. There is no time when you talk about 1 + 1 = 2. This happens outside of time. And so in the Platonic realm, I imagine time doesn't really impact these entities. The best thing I can come up with is archetypes, or that's what I would like to call them, archetypes. And this is sort of how different concepts that are similar relate and form a sort of cloud of ideas or a web of concepts. For example, friendship might relate to good, might relate to happiness. It might be opposite. It might be opposed to the concept of bad, and bad might be related to unpleasant, and unpleasant might be related to an evil person, or just things like that, and how these different ideas kind of cluster together, and these different clusters, we could call them conceptual archetypes. I guess that the fact is they influence us in the physical world by almost trying to consume our mental life, by trying to become a thought which we ruminate over and over and over again, a thought complex that, you know, we become obsessed with, but they themselves are essentially just concepts. So they don't necessarily have time, and they pretty much are just there, and it's us who periodically, in the physical plane, we periodically or sometimes ruminate obsessively about these different archetypal structures and they become our belief systems, they become our gods, or especially I think there's a clear parallel between these conceptual archetypes and how the traditional, more polytheistic religions, how each god has a specific role, like one god is the god of justice, one god is the god of evil, and they sort of have these different kind of archetypal relational aspects associated with each of the gods. And to me, it seems like perhaps these sort of archetypal constructions are entities or are objects that exist in the Platonic realm, and that they are sort of like higher entities that influence us by trying to possess our psyche or our thoughts. Anyways, these are just some considerations I've been having or I've had for a while. I guess I'm just interested in or in hearing what you guys think about what I have to say. If you have any criticisms or concerns or areas you would like me to elaborate on. I mean, there really is a lot to say here. Maybe I'll cut it short. I'll say more about this later. Anyways, thanks for tuning in. If you like this type of thing, please feel free to subscribe, like the video. Anyways, thanks. This was Phil with Skeletons and Coffers. Have a good one. Take it easy.